Imagine being worth over $100 billion, yet still living in the same modest house you bought in 1958. No luxury mansions, no sports cars, no yachts. Just a simple house in Omaha, Nebraska. That's Warren Buffett, the man the world calls the Oracle of Omaha. And his story is nothing like the typical billionaire fairy tale. Because Warren Buffett wasn't born into wealth. He wasn't handed a billion-dollar inheritance. He built his fortune from scratch, using patience, discipline, and a philosophy so simple, yet so powerful, that it transformed him into one of the richest men alive. Warren Edward Buffett was born in 1930 during the Great Depression, a time when millions of Americans were struggling to even put food on the table. His father, Howard Buffett, worked as a stockbroker, but also became a politician later. His mother, Layla, often skipped meals to make sure Warren and his siblings had enough to eat. From an early age, Warren was fascinated with money, not because he wanted to spend it, but because he loved the game of making it grow. At just 6 years old, little Warren would buy a pack of Coca-Cola bottles for 25 cents, then go door to door selling each bottle for a nickel. He earned his first few cents of profit that way, and it lit a fire in him that never went out. By the age of 11, while most kids were busy playing baseball, Warren made his first stock market investment. He bought 3 shares of Citi Service Preferred at $38 each. But soon, the stock dropped to $27. Imagine being just 11 years old, watching your money sink, feeling that pit in your stomach. But Warren held on. Eventually, the stock rose back up to $40, and young Buffett sold his shares. He made a small profit, but later, the stock skyrocketed to $200. That early mistake taught him a lesson that would shape his entire life. Patience pays more than panic. Emotional trigger. Think about that for a second. At 11 years old, Warren Buffett had already learned a lesson that most adults still fail to understand today. That wealth doesn't come from quick wins. It comes from waiting for the right moment. And that patience would become his superpower. Buffett absorbed everything. He wasn't just a student, he was a sponge. He read, studied, and applied Graham's methods with laser focus. The rejection, an emotional setback. After graduating, Buffett wanted to work directly for Benjamin Graham. He offered to work for free, just for the chance to learn. But Graham turned him down. Imagine that Warren Buffett, one of the greatest investors in history, was once rejected for a free internship. But instead of giving up, Warren went back to Omaha, Nebraska, determined to make it on his own. And this rejection would become one of the most important blessings in his life. Buffett Partnership, the beginning of fortune. In 1956, at just 26 years old, Warren Buffett started his first investment partnership. He gathered money from family and friends, just $105,000 in total. Out of that, Buffett himself contributed only $100. Yes, you heard that right, $100. But what he lacked in money, he made up for in intelligence, discipline, and patience. He promised his investors something bold. He would grow their money faster than the stock market, without taking unnecessary risks. And he delivered. Year after year, Buffett outperformed Wall Street. While other investors chased quick profits, he looked for hidden gems, companies nobody cared about, but that had solid fundamentals. He called it buying dollar bills for 50 cents. By the time he was 35, Buffett was already a millionaire. And yet, he still lived a modest life. While his wealth grew, his lifestyle barely changed. Emotional contrast. Buffett's philosophy versus the world. Most people in America, at that time, wanted to get rich fast. They gambled on stocks, bought fancy cars, and showed off their wealth the moment they had it. But Warren Buffett played a completely different game. He stayed quiet, disciplined, and patient. He bought companies that nobody wanted. He held on to them when others panicked. And he proved something powerful, that real wealth isn't built overnight. It's built brick by brick, year by year, with patience and strategy. Early investments, seeds of greatness. One of Buffett's most famous early moves was buying shares of American Express in the 1960s. At the time, the company was in crisis because of scandal. Everyone thought it was finished. But Buffett looked deeper. He realized that American Express still had strong customers, strong brand value, and long-term potential. So while everyone else sold, Buffett bought. His bet paid off massively, and it became one of his legendary investments. This was his style, finding value where others saw disaster. Seeing opportunity in chaos. Betting on fundamentals, not hype. Emotional punch, the patient game. Buffett once said, the stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. Imagine him, just a young man in a small office in Omaha, poring over pages of numbers, while Wall Street was buzzing with big deals in New York. Most people would think he was wasting his time. But Warren had a gift, the gift of patience and long-term vision. The Buffett Partnership. In 1956, at just 25 years old, Warren took a bold step. He started his own investment partnership with just 7 investors and $105,000. He himself contributed only $100. Think about that. Warren Buffett, the man who would one day become one of the richest people alive, started his empire with just $100 of his own money. The partnership was simple. Warren would manage the money, make the investment decisions, and take a small fee only if the investments grew. Unlike Wall Street fund managers, he didn't earn money unless his investors earned money too. That's how much he believed in his ability. And believe me, his results were astonishing. While the stock market delivered modest gains, Buffett's partnership grew much faster. Year after year, he outperformed Wall Street's smartest minds. The news began to spread in Omaha. There's this young guy named Warren Buffett who's making people rich. But Warren wasn't focused on fame or luxury. He still lived simply, in the same city, in the same modest way. His joy came not from spending money, but from watching it grow. The Berkshire Hathaway story. Now, here comes a twist in the story, a twist that would define Warren Buffett's legacy forever. In the early 1960s, Warren discovered a struggling textile company called Berkshire Hathaway. The company was failing, the textile industry was declining, and nobody saw any future in it. But Warren saw something different. The stock price was low, and the company had assets that were undervalued. So he bought shares. Lots of them. At first, he thought he would flip the company for a profit. But soon, he gained control of Berkshire Hathaway. And here's where the genius move happened. Instead of keeping it as just a textile business, Warren used Berkshire Hathaway as his investment vehicle. Slowly, he shifted the company away from textiles and turned it into a holding company that bought other businesses. This decision, this single move, changed everything. Berkshire Hathaway became the platform through which Warren would build one of the largest investment empires in history. The businesses he bought. Warren didn't buy flashy, trendy companies. Instead, he bought businesses that were simple, reliable, and built to last. He invested in companies like Coca-Cola, because people would always drink soda. American Express, because trust and finance are timeless. See's Candies, a small candy company that produced consistent profits. The Washington Post, because information and journalism had value. These weren't risky bets. They were smart, calculated moves. And Warren always followed his rule, never invest in a business you don't understand. The making of the Oracle. By the late 1960s and 70s, Warren Buffett had built a reputation not just as a successful investor, but as a teacher of wisdom. People started calling him the Oracle of Omaha because his advice was so clear, so simple, and yet so powerful. He lived in the same modest house he bought in 1958, drove himself to work, and lived without the trappings of wealth. While other billionaires showed off yachts and mansions, Warren was more interested in his books, his investments, and his cherry Coke. And this is where the emotional trigger comes in. Warren Buffett showed the world that you don't need to be born into wealth, you don't need to live in a big city, and you don't need to chase trends to become successful. You just need patience, discipline, and the courage to be different. The emotional lesson. Imagine being a young person in America during that time. The world was full of noise, people chasing quick money, chasing glamour, chasing fame. And then there was Warren Buffett, sitting quietly in Omaha, proving that slow, steady, and intelligent work could beat them all. His story gave hope to ordinary Americans. It told them, you don't need to be special. You just need to be smart with your money. And this is why Warren Buffett's life story isn't just about finance. It's about hope, patience, and the idea that greatness can come from the simplest beginnings. 2006, Warren Buffett pledged to give away more than 99% of his fortune to charity. Yes, the man who built billions spent his last years planning how to give it all back to the world. He joined hands with Bill Gates and launched the Giving Pledge, inspiring other billionaires to donate their wealth to solve humanity's biggest problems: poverty, education, health. Think about that for a moment. A man who could have passed his fortune down for generations chose instead to give it away. He believed that money is just a tool that means nothing if it doesn't improve lives. So what lesson can you take from Warren Buffett's journey? It's not just about becoming a billionaire. It's about creating discipline in your 20s, patience in your 30s, wisdom in your 40s, and purpose in your 50s and beyond. Because in the end, nobody remembers how much you had. They remember how much you gave, how you treated people, and what values you stood for. Warren Buffett's life isn't just the story of a billionaire, it's the story of a man who showed the world that true wealth is measured in time, love, and legacy. So here's the question: what legacy will you leave behind? If Warren Buffett's story inspired you, imagine the lessons hid.